Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look at the latest from the live radar, run for the UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days, as it does look likely to be relatively dry and relatively warm. Nothing too special for this time of year, but temperatures into the high teens or even low 20s by this weekend into the start of next week, as we do have high pressure building in. But at the moment, the upper air temperatures are not anything exceptional, and that's why those surface conditions are not going to be anything more than warm in the sunshine. However, as we head towards the end of the month, within the next 10 to 14 days, as we'll see from the various long-range charts, GFS, GM, ECMWF, and the ensembles, there is a growing trend for quite a warm or hot end to the month. We're seeing upper air temperatures perhaps reach as high as 10 degrees at 850 HPA, or maybe even slightly higher on some runs, but most around that 10 degree range, which would give widespread temperatures into the low 20s, maybe even mid 20s in some regions. And of course, with that air coming from the south, quite a warm, hot, humid direction could also bring the risk of thunderstorms as well, depending on the exact setup. So we did see a very cold start to the spring, could we be seeing a very hot end to the spring as we do get towards the end of May. We'll explore that, as I said, in the second half of the video. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in description. Now you can see on the live radar it is a relatively dry day. There are areas of thicker cloud and a few areas of rain across perhaps northern England into the Midlands and through Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland into Scotland. A bit of a stretched out weak weather front there, coming into the higher pressure, losing a lot of its intensity. So most areas not seeing a lot of rain at all, but a few areas seeing some of these drizzly showers. Again, recording this around the middle of the afternoon, sort of peak temperature times. You can see through most of England and Wales, those temperatures are into the mid to high teens, maybe even touching 20 degrees in some of the spots down into the southwest as well. And of course, further north and westward, seeing that weather front move in, thicker cloud, hold those temperatures down a bit, but it's still not all too cool there. So another relatively decent day, but nothing more than sort of average or slightly above average for the time of year. If we do have a look at the UKV and see how that does develop over the course of the next few weeks, the next few days, we'll look at the long range charts, look at the next few weeks. You can see through the rest of this afternoon quite a bit of thick cloud in places, but generally relatively dry. As we do head into Friday, that weather front continues to make progress, could pep up a little bit along the east coast in the early hours of the morning, so it shouldn't affect too many people. But as we head into the mid-morning time, still could be a bit of lingering rain across central England, maybe eastern England, but again, nothing too intense. And there could be a few heavy thundery showers breaking across central England into southern England through Friday afternoon. But once again, another relatively dry day, just quite a lot of thick cloud, unfortunately, associated with that. As we head into Saturday, again, another weak weather front moves in. Could give a bit of rain, but again, not accounting for too much as it does move in. Most areas, once again, relatively dry, especially further southwards and eastwards you go. And the same into Sunday. Few bits of rain in the north and west, but most areas, once again, are very dry. And as we head into Monday, again, very similar. A few showers, but mostly dry conditions. And that's because the mean sea level pressure, you can see high pressure is dominating us. Perhaps a slack easterly flow, which could cool temperatures down in a minute, a little bit, but we'll have a look at that in a minute. But most areas dry and warm. The upper air temperatures do climb to relatively high levels as we do head into early next week. So again, encouraging those temperatures to get into the high teens or low 20s quite widely. Now you can see this afternoon those temperatures did peak or are peaking around the mid to high teens, if not touching 20 degrees, but it's not a widespread warm day. Warm in places, but generally average in most regions. As we head into tomorrow, into Friday, we do see that area of warmth really staying further westwards. Further eastwards, that cloud and a bit of rain will hold those temperatures down. But again, that could clear a lot faster. So we're very much dependent on the cloud and rain amounts. But once again, most areas average, slightly below or slightly above. If you have a look at the Saturday point, it will be turning quite a bit warmer, quite widely there, more around that 18 to 20 degree mark. That easterly flow down the eastern coast still holding those temperatures down a little bit, and even inland we're not going to get much above 20 or 21. So nothing exceptionally warm for the time of year, but above average definitely into Saturday. And as we head into Sunday, again, widely 18 to 20 degrees, maybe touching 21. So it's going to be another pretty stunning day for many regions. Again, the further north and westwards you go, it will cool down as those air masses try to push in off the Atlantic. Those cooler Arctic air masses try to push in. And again, could bring a bit of rain and cloud, but mostly still pretty dry. And finally into Monday, again another widely warm day, even climbing slightly higher, 20 to 23 degrees across large areas of England, Wales, into parts of southern Republic of Ireland, and into parts of southern Scotland too. So a much warmer day on Monday. Signs of 23 degrees there. That would be the warmest day of the year so far if we saw something like that. But we will just have to confirm that near the time, as it is still 5 days away. But definitely a trend of it warming up. But this could be nothing compared to what we do see as we do head in towards the end of May. So if you do now have a look at the long range, if we start on the GFS, you can see the high pressure is built in at the moment, and it's continuing to dominate over the coming days. Could see brief weather fronts scrape underneath it, which could, as I said, keep things a little bit cooler and a little bit of rain in places. But mostly over the next few days, high pressure will dominate, and that is the pattern going forward. As we get into the longer term, the high pressure could move more towards Scandinavia, which does pull in more of an east to southeasterly wind. The exact orientation could give a cooler edge to it, but if it is a southeasterly, like we're starting to see develop here, where the air is originating from the Mediterranean, it will mean that those conditions are quite a bit warmer here. As we do progress, you can see a bit of a cut-off low potentially developing down towards the Bay of Biscay, but regardless of this, it'll be a very warm air mass, but it could be quite thundery with that. Again, we put at the upper air temperatures, 10 to even 15 degree isotherm moving in there. That would be very warm into the longer term, temperatures in the mid to high 20s with this, but low pressure getting wrapped in it. So very warm in the longer term, still being generally dominated by higher pressure, but signs of a bit of an upper trough right into the last few days of May and into the start of June, which could give quite a thundery end. Warm, humid, but potentially quite thundery there. Again, look at the temperature deviation. You see it's well above average, getting as high as 10 degrees above average along that east coast potentially, as we do see that very warm air move in. The hottest air actually goes towards Scandinavia there, 12 degrees above average. So if this was orientated slightly differently in the longer term, it could pull that very hot air in towards the UK. Could even see 30 degrees with that. But we will just have to see nearer the time. The one thing we do need to focus on is that it is going to be fairly warm, a lot warmer than it's been recently, and it will be very dry too. And that's a pretty consistent signal from the GFS now. And as we'll see with some other runs in a minute, very consistent signal from them as well. So do have a look at the GM, see how that does compare. Again, high pressure building in, continues to look very warm and very dry. Could see a brief cooler spell there through Tuesday into Wednesday, running down that east coast, but right towards the end of the range. Into day 10, high pressure firmly built in, bit of a southeasterly flow and a relatively warm air mass. Nothing ridiculous, upper air temperatures 10 degrees at 850 HPA and a good 6 to 8 degrees above average. And again, if we zoom into the United Kingdom look, you can see by midday it's around 20 to 22 degrees, 23 degrees in the best spots. So most likely by 3 p.m, 24 or 25 will be the most likely scenario here. So mid-20s and widely mid-20s in spots, widely low 20s. That's definitely looking something that's a real possibility towards the end of May. Anything higher than that the GFS could have suggested, we would just have to see, as said, nearer the time. If you look at the ECMWF, again, high pressure in complete control at the moment, continuing to be in control over the coming days. Again, could be some brief little incursions of cooler air early next week, and maybe slightly unsettled conditions, but really nothing too crazy. And right towards day 10, continuing the trend of high pressure sat over the top of us. North of Scotland, always close to these lows, so could see a few passing weather fronts and a few areas of instability, but generally pretty dry. And you can see it is relatively warm too. Not quite as warm as the other runs, but still getting above average for most areas, a good 2 to maybe as high as 6 degrees above average in a few spots. So not quite as warm as the other runs, but still pretty decent. Again, we're putting the United Kingdom look, and you can see widely into the high teens, even touching the low 20s by midday. So again, could be 22, 23 degrees by 3 p.m, the peak time of the day. So all three main runs today are showing something very warm as we head towards sort of the longer term, day 10 to day 14, and regardless of that, the next sort of 14 days in general as being very dry too, with high pressure dominating pretty much all the time, especially for England, Wales, Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. Scotland, though, could see a few incursions of lower pressure at times, which could keep it a little bit cooler, and as I said, we'll have to look at those details nearer the time. So to finish the video, but just now have a look at the ensemble. You see it's really well reflected, generally average to slightly below over the next couple of days, then slightly above into early next week, but generally around average to around the 25th, 26th of May. So the next week or so, sort of in and around the average mark, a couple of degrees above, a couple of degrees below. So really around that 20-degree mark for the best places. But as we head into the last few days of May, from around the 26th to the 28th onwards, we do see those upper air temperatures climb even higher. So around 5 degrees above average, up towards 10 degrees at 850 HPA, which would give temperatures around 25 degrees. In the summer months, I normally have a sort of a standard 15-degree add-on to the upper air temperatures. So when it's 5 degrees at 850 HPA, we would expect the top temperature to be 20 degrees. When it is 10 degrees at 850 HPA, we'd expect the top temperature to be about 25 degrees at the surface. And of course, when we saw insane conditions last summer of reaching 40 degrees, we saw those upper air temperatures reaching the low 20s. So again, adding that 15-degree mark gets you to those high 30s, if not touching that 40-degree mark. So that's the rough sort of calculation I do this time of year when we are looking at those surface temperatures. Whenever we look at the 850 HPA chart, you normally can add about 15 degrees onto that. So into the longer term, up towards 10 degrees at 850 HPA, looking widely into the mid-20s. But if we see some of these very warm runs getting up towards 15 degrees, that could allow the temperatures to get into the high 20s, maybe even an isolated 30 degrees somewhere. But I must say, most likely in that sort of 23 to 25 degree range is what we're looking at here, with most runs around the high single digits, if not touching 10 or 11 degrees at 850 HPA in the longer term. There is a bit more precipitation in the longer term, and as I said, as we saw in the GFS, could be because we see a bit of an upper trough moving in, which could give a few thunderstorms in places. But again, we'll have to specify that nearer the time. But it is generally quite a dry outlook. If we look at the 2 meter temperatures, we'll be able to see this pretty well reflected, most around the high teens, if not touching 20 degrees in a few spots over the next week, then climbing more to mostly around the 20s, sort of 21, 22, and then some of those warmer runs getting up towards that 25-degree mark, and again some anomalous ones getting towards 26, 27, and again with those sort of widespread temperatures, you could expect an isolated 30 degrees somewhere with that. Remember, these spikes show at midday and 6 p.m, so the 3 p.m. peak temperature isn't quite in here, so that's why we can always add a little bit on to the top of these peaks, as really the highest point here is showing the midday temperature, which is probably a degree or two at least below the 3 p.m. peak. So that's why I'm saying most of these are probably showing low to mid-20s right by 3 p.m. as we head into the longer range. And if we look at the mean sea level pressure into the long term, you can see that generally it is higher pressure, perhaps signs of some briefly lower pressure in the longer term into the end of May and start of June, but of course that could be associated with some very warm, hot, humid air, so it could be hot but thundery. And finally, just to compare to the ECMWF for the midnight run. It looks like, unfortunately, the midnight run hasn't fully developed on Veta Central, so we have to look at the midday run from yesterday, as the 6 o'clock run doesn't go out beyond sort of 5 days or so. So a little bit out of date data, but definitely still that trend for much warmer conditions in the longer term. Still more precipitation here, but again, we have to take into account the 50 ensemble members, but still a generally very similar trend to the GFS. So it is looking very dry over the next couple of weeks. There will be bits and bobs of rain, so not completely bone dry, but not really expecting anything too much, apart from perhaps some northern areas of Scotland. So mostly dry, relatively warm over the next sort of week or so. Nothing exceptional, maybe getting sort of topping out at maybe 21 to 23 degrees in the best spots, but mostly sort of high teens or touching 20 degrees. And as we head into the last few days of May, we could, as I said, be seeing conditions getting even warmer with widespread 20 degrees and maybe even touching 25 degrees in some spots, and even some anomalous runs showing something a bit warmer. So as I said at the start of the video, March started very cold with widespread snow in places in the first week or two. The last week or two of May looks like it's going to end. That's very dry and potentially very warm or even hot too. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Make sure to enjoy the sunny and warm weather out there over the next couple of weeks. And I'll see you again for another video soon.